Flying Upstream, the podcast where we explore the real, raw, and often non-linear path of transformation, healing, and living from truth. Today's guest is someone who reminds us that it is never too late to learn something new, to not change course, and definitely not to heal. I'm so honored to welcome Yvonne Caputo to this show. Has worn many hats throughout her life. She's been a teacher, a psychotherapist, a corporate trainer, a vice president of human resources, and always a storyteller at heart. At 72, she published her first book, Flying with Dad, a moving story of how sharing her father's World War II stories transformed their relationship. Her second book, Dying with Dad, is a powerful look at how the two of them navigated end of life conversations with honesty and grace. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to try something new or to repair what feels broken, this episode is for you. Yvonne, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're so excited. I'm so excited to get to know more about you. And I want to start with a little bit about your layered career from education to psychotherapy to corporate leadership. What's the inner thread connected to all those chapters?
The inner thread started that as a woman, there were two careers open to me when I graduated from high school: teaching and nursing. And I chose to be a teacher. And then 18 years into my career, I met this man named Kirk. And he had two children from a previous marriage. And so I went from northwestern Pennsylvania to southeastern Pennsylvania, and luckily had a second master's degree in clinical psych, which meant that I could go into employee assistance work. The question that the director of the program asked me as a part of the interview was, would you be interested in doing training? Of course. I mean, I'd spent so many years in the classroom, that just felt like a natural segue for me. So I did that, and then I did corporate training from the Employee Assistance Program for a retirement community. And the CEO of that company really liked what I had done, and he called me and said, our human resource person is retiring. Would you be interested? And in my head, I thought, this would be a way for me to see if all of the skills that I was developing through my classes and through the training that I was doing, I could do it from the inside of the organization rather than from the outside. So I spent 17 years there before I retired. And in that time was the time when Dad and I were talking on the phone about his World War II stories. So luckily for me, Dad was able to see the first draft of the book before he passed away. But it took me another 9 years to get it published.
Wow.
So all of this kind of thing is just, all right, I think of being on a road, and the road has twists and turns. And if you want to go somewhere, you're going to have to follow those twists and turns and see where you end up. And where I ended up was in my, what I call now, delicious semi-retirement. I'm an author, and I market my books. And I, yes, speak about the first book, Flying with Dad, but I also speak passionately about Dying with Dad, which is the second book. So that's the history.
That's beautiful. I love that your career trajectory sounds a lot like the winding path of life. So you didn't just set out, I mean, even though it sounded like you only had two options when you graduated, you didn't just accept that. You kind of started looking for more, and more landed on your lap, and you took the opportunities and you grew from those opportunities, and eventually, landed to where you are today, which is being an author. And the beauty of that, what I love most about all of that is what the books are about. I love that it's about your, the with your dad mainly, that it's around your dad, and that beautiful relationship that we get to develop with our parents once we're older, and once we're able to sort of see the world from their perspective a little bit more than we do when we're younger. Um, what prompted the conversations about World War II to start?
Dad lived on the northwestern part of Pennsylvania, and I live in the southeast. But every week we would be on the phone. And Dad was a brittle diabetic. So we would talk about dialysis treatments and doctor's appointments and in home care. And we stalled when that was all over. I am not a sports fan. I don't know from football. I don't know from baseball. So on this one evening, late January, cold, dark outside my office window, he opens up and tells me this story. Quirky, funny, off the wall, making an emergency landing in freed Belgium toward the end of World War II. Never had said anything about it. Now I knew that he had been a navigator on B 24s during the war. That much he did say. But these little side stories, nothing. Had never heard anything. Well, I love history. So the very next phone call, I said, Dad, if you're willing, start at the beginning. And he did. And story after story comes rolling off of his tongue. And on that first call, I said, let me get a pencil and paper. I want to take notes. His response was, what the hell do you want to do that for? And I told him, I said, this is good. I bet you the family would really like having this written up. So that next call, I just wanted to see if maybe he would say more. And he did. So every phone call thereafter, we would go from chapter to chapter to chapter to chapter. We did it chronologically. It started when Dad was graduating from high school in the depth of the Depression with no job. However, he was told to go to the welfare office and see if they might be able to help him find something to do. Doesn't he participate in one of Roosevelt's programs? And it was called the Youth Administration Corps. Dad saw a list of occupations that he could train for. And he said, my finger went down, and he said, I saw airplane repair, and he had built model airplanes from the time he was 10. He said, now I could work on the real thing. That's what started it. So we get into all of this only for me to find out that because he learned to repair airplanes, he never would have had to have gone. He had a presidential deferment that would have kept him home in the United States, repairing the airplanes that young pilots, in Dad's words, busted up. The only thing is that by luck or happenstance, who knows, an AT-6, which is a training plane, comes into his depot in Macon, Georgia, and he doesn't have a wing. So Dad did the ordinary thing. He called all the depots around the United States. Do you have a wing? If so, ship it to me. No wing. So he went to his supervisor and said, "Do you have the blueprints?" And the guy said, "Sure, what are you going to do with those?" Dad said, "I'll build it." 19 years old, and he builds a 17.5 foot wing, attaches it to the AT-6. The pilot, knowing that this kid made the wing, came to Dad and said, "Is it going to fly?" Dad said, "Yeah." "You're sure it's going to fly?" Dad said, "Yeah." "Well, good, son, get in, because if it goes down, you're going down with it."
Oh my goodness.
So Dad's in this two-seater, and he said to me, exact words, "Hun, I didn't want to fix them anymore. I wanted to fly them." He petitioned to get out of his deferment to enter the Army Air Force. And because of the fact that he didn't get into the service until late, he didn't get to England until he was 23. He was an old man flying. He was navigating a B-24.
No.
So that's how it happened. And through the writing of the book, I discovered the Dad I didn't know. I discovered all these things about him. He was funny, gregarious. I'm trying to find the words. Pretty confident, and did all of these things because the road twisted and turned for him as well. And in the process of writing the book, Dad shared the nightmares with me. He's in a B-24 in the nightmare. The 24 is hit and it's going down. And he can't get to the place where he can bail out. And in the nightmare, he has to go through this open way that's lined with stainless steel. And it can't get purchased. There's nothing for him to put his fingers on to pull himself through. And he would wake up. Mother would wake him up because he'd be screaming. He literally dug channels in the mattress. And when he's telling me about this nightmare, I'm a therapist, so I said, "Well, you know, those nightmares are normal." "What the hell do you mean?" I said, "Well, Dad." And then I explained to him the neurobiology of nightmares and how it is normal when we see traumatic events that our brain latches on. And his brain was trying to work through the trauma that he'd witnessed through those nightmares.
Yeah.
And this is the place where I say, I'm getting to know my father on a level that I'd never experienced before. I finally understood the anger that was always just under the surface with Dad. It would take very little for him to just boom. Now, he never hit us, but yell, he was a master. And I will admit to being afraid of my father growing up. But now, later in life, I understood where the anger came from. Because at the time he left the service, they didn't know about nightmares. They didn't know about flashbacks. They didn't know what was normal to these men who had witnessed this horrific stuff.
Yeah.
So the gift I was able to give to my father was sarcasm. "Sorry, pal, your nightmares are normal." "Sorry, pal, your flashback was normal." But as I said, that helped me to understand the Dad I just never knew. And once I understood it, it was easier for him to trust me and easier for me to trust him. So it flipped our relationship to one of best thing I ever had.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So it's great to hear, that was going to be one of my questions, how it changed your relationship with your dad. But I'm also interested in what shifted in you then when you went back and wrote all these things for the book, because you were taking notes as he was sharing them, but then you had to go back and put them together for the book. What shifted in you? What changed?
I found a way to love and honor my father. I mean, everything in my life. Um, I'm a person of faith, and God has directed my path. So, that being a teacher, then being a psychotherapist, then working with the elderly, all of these things laid the groundwork so that when Dad opened up, I saw the whole man. Not just the angry part that I saw as a child. I saw all of it. And it helped me to love him for who he was, not for who I wanted him to be. The flip of that is, he turned out to be who I wanted him to be. And that's where Dying with Dad, the second book, came into being. That wasn't written until after Dad had passed away. People who read my first book, when I talked to them face to face, had questions. How could you let your dad go? Didn't you want to save him?
Yeah.
Where did you find the courage? In this getting to know Dad through the first book, we started talking very seriously about death and dying. And I went with Dad to the attorney to create an advanced directive. And Dad gave me the legal power to speak for him if he couldn't speak for himself. That's where the trust level had begun to solidify. So, along with that, working in a retirement community, don't I come across a document called the Five Wishes. Now, this is an advanced directive on heart. Yes, it asks the same questions. What medical care did he want? What medical care did he not want? How did he want to be treated? It did all that. It, in the same way, gave me the power to speak for him. But what it asked were questions like this. How do you want to be remembered? What do you want your children to know? Do you want to be cremated or do you want to be buried? What kind of a funeral do you want? All that. So when that document was done, I knew it all. So here's what happened. Dad had been in the hospital back in my hometown. It was Christmas time. He found himself in the hospital at Christmas a lot, because if he was there, he had all kinds of people to dote on him, and they did. So Kirk and I and his brother went back to my hometown, visited Dad over Christmas, cleaned the house, got groceries in, made everything the way it needed to be for Dad to come home. But Dad was still there in the hospital when we left. The social worker came to me and said, "When can we send your father home?" I said, "He can go home when he's ready." He had in-home care, so everything was set for him to be able to be at home. Kirk and I drove across the state of Pennsylvania, 6.5 hours. I'm home no more than 2 hours. Dad's on the phone, screaming at me, the top of his lungs. And I'm holding the phone out here because I can hear every word he's saying. When he finally settled down, I said, Dad, I told them that you could go home when you were ready. It doesn't sound like you're ready. To which he said, Yvonne, can you come back? I'm scared. I said, I will be in the car tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I will make some calls and find someone to come and stay with you so you aren't alone. I was home at my father's house for 2.5 hours when he was gone. He waited for me to come home. He waited for me to be there so that I could say to the EMTs, this is not what Dad wants. I called the hospital. There's a do not resuscitate order on Dad's chart. Get it to the emergency room. God's hands in this now, because the ER doctor called the EMT workers and said, you can stop. So I laid down beside my dad. I put my arm over his chest. I told him that I loved him. I told him that he would be with Mom, which is where he wanted to be. And then I did the glue that was part of our family, and that was, I said the Lord's Prayer. And he was gone. And my father's wish, stated to me over and over again in the many conversations we had about death and dying, I want to go feet first out of my own home. So the EMTs put him on the gurney, took him down the steps of his house, set the gurney down at the back of the ambulance. The doors of the ambulance are open, and the snow is coming down an inch an hour, or northwestern Pennsylvania. And the light from the ambulance is shining on my dad's face. And there is this soft, sweet smile. And I went, yes! And the EMTs looked at me like I'd lost any marble I might have had. And I said to them, feet first out of his home, that's what he wanted, and you did it. So the passion I have around the second book is for all of us to have these conversations with our loved ones, for all of us to do advance directives, for all of us to look up this document called The 5 Wishes. It's $5, and it's legal in 42 states. To do those kinds of things with our loved ones so that when the time comes, my dad gave me a gift. He trusted me. Yeah. He trusted me to honor him the way he asked to be honored. And I went with that trust. It was the biggest gift my father had ever given me.
That's amazing. So, that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And I love your message. I have a legal background. I've been in the legal field for the last 17 years. And one of the most difficult things that I've experienced is the absence of those medical directives, the absence of the power of attorneys, because in the very crucial moments when it matters, when they're not in place, it's gut-wrenching to watch what a family and what people have to go through just for the absence of that. So I love your message. I mostly love your journey, that you were able to share such beautiful moments and experiences and get to know your dad to the level that you did, because I think a lot of us don't get to experience that in our lifetime. So thank you for sharing both of those things. As we begin to wrap up, I have a question for you. Do you feel like your soul came here to learn something with relation to this relationship with your father and writing the books, that has sort of, you know, how you said it's been guided by God? Do you feel like that was part of the journey that God set out for you here? And what do you think you were meant to learn from that?
I have a great deal of admiration and respect for the religious and spiritual traditions of our Native Americans. And some of the nations believe in the Good Red Road, that we are set on earth to walk along this road, no matter where the road takes us, and to work at, accept, follow through on what it is that we need to learn and do. And so, absolutely, my journey, all of the careers that I chose to do, all of the life lessons, even having my father, having him be the man that is a father to me, would give me an opportunity to learn to love in the deepest meaning of the word, to learn to respect in the deepest meaning of the word. This man who was a father to me. So I'm eternally grateful. And I can say to your audience, because this is really important to me, do I grieve the loss of my father? Absolutely. Do I wish I could talk to him? Absolutely. But what I experience is a profound joy along with the sorrow. And that's such a special thing to have.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you went away.
I'm so sorry. This is our 106th episode, and this has never happened before. So I'm really sorry about that. You were sharing about the beauty that it has been in the journey and the road that you were meant to walk, and part of learning how to love in the deepest and most beautiful of ways. Um, can you elaborate on that? That's when my internet decided to.
Okay, sure. Um, what I'd love your listeners to know is that, do I miss my dad? Absolutely. Have there been occasions, it's been 15 years, where I could still be a puddle? Would I like to cook him one more pot roast dinner? Sure. But equal to the sorrow is a profound joy. And if all of us think about our grief journeys rather, with people, when does that happen? When do we get to have an equal amount of joy surrounding the death of a loved one?
Yeah. Yeah, that is so beautiful. And for the audience, where can they find your books? Because I know I'm going to be reading both of them.
Okay, so on the internet, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, um, also, if you're a lover of independent bookstores, okay, go into your independent bookstore, they'll look it up and they'll order it for you.
Perfect. I love it.
And if people want to get in touch with me, my email is pretty simple, Yvonne at YvonneCaputo.com.
Perfect. And we will link all of that in the show notes. We will link how they can get a hold of you via email. We will link where the books can be found, and any other information that we have for you. So for our listeners, I want to thank you so much. And Yvonne, thank you for coming on. Thank you for managing all of the technology issues that we have had today. I will tell you that this is a first, for us. And even at the beginning, I know that we struggled a little. So thank you so much for being a trooper today. I really appreciate that. For listeners, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to this beautiful story that Yvonne has shared with us. I hope that you will go on and that you will grab the books. Yvonne is really a living example of what it means to keep growing, to keep softening, and to keep showing up no matter what your age or what your past history is. Her story really is a reminder that healing doesn't expire, and that if you have the courage, you can look into having the conversations you thought you'd never have, and you can learn something about someone that you love that you could never imagine. If this conversation has moved you, I encourage you to check out her books, Flying with Dad and Dying with Dad, and consider the stories in your own life that may be waiting to be told. Until next time, and as always, keep flying upstream.